And welcome back to Washington Commanders Insider. Today, we're going to be looking at the most important positions that the Washington Commanders need to upgrade as they move into this upcoming season. And so, let's start with the running back room. And so, you can find this on Commanders Wire. And in this article, they're talking about the 10 things that we have learned from the Washington Commanders this season. And right now, we're starting with the position that I think needs to really be upgraded for the Washington Commanders and these running backs. And so when we look at the stats, I think it is very interesting because Brian Robinson Jr., he was our running back one here. He had 187 carries, 799 yards, 4.3 the average, and he also had 8 touchdowns. You had Austin Eckler behind him, 77 carries, 367 yards. He had 4 touchdowns on the year. And then you have Jeremy McNichols, 55 carries, 261, 4 touchdowns for him. Then after that, Chris Rodriguez Jr., 35 carries, 173 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns on the year, averaging 4.9 an average. And so with that, I find it interesting that out of all our running backs, Jaden Daniels actually outrushed them all. He had 148 carries, 891 yards, 6 yards a carry, and he had 6 touchdowns as well. And so, look, I think that right there indicates that we needed to get a little bit more out of the running back room because we know that Jaden Daniels is terrific as a runner, but he's also he was more geared towards getting the football down the field. And so I think that to take some more pressure off of Jaden Daniels and also, too, to make it tougher on defenses, we need to add a little bit more punch to the running back room. And so I know that Brian Robinson Jr. was probably not as healthy, I think, going down the stretch. In fact, I think he played in 14 games. Austin Eckler, 12. Jeremy McNichols, he played in all 17. And Chris Rodriguez Jr., he was kind of back and forth on the roster, played at 9. But where it gets interesting is that between Jeremy McNichols and Chris Rodriguez Jr., these guys are free agents. And so there's a chance maybe that they don't come back to the team or the Washington Commanders go a different direction. With Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler, I think that they're a little bit more of a sure bet unless something drastic happens. But if those two are the only two running backs back, that suggests to me that the Washington Commanders should do something as far as upgrading that room. And so I think the first thing that they could do, before they get to the draft is they could look at the free agency. And so when you look at the free agents and some of the free agents out here, there's only one free agent that I think maybe makes sense for the Washington Commanders, and I think perhaps gives them the power running back that they want, and also to a bit of speed and that breakaway ability. And I like him, and it's Aaron Jones. I think that Aaron Jones would be a player if he doesn't go back to the Vikings. Maybe you consider bringing him in. I'm not saying that it's a long-term deal, and I think that this is more of a short-term fix. But if you're going to the free agent market, maybe you go with him. Here's a player that did rush for over 1,000 yards at 4.5 an average, but 5 touchdowns. And he also is a very good receiver out of the backfield. He had 51 receptions. And so one of the things that we like to do with our offense is we like to, utilize the screen game. You can see how that would be even more dynamic with Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones, and then you have the power of Brian Robinson Jr. here. And so suddenly that running back room maybe becomes dangerous as long as everybody can stay healthy. Now, if the Washington Commanders don't go the free agent route, which that is very possible, I think that they can really upgrade this room via the draft. I think that there are some terrific running backs out there, and I think the Washington Commanders will have a chance. And, with a draft class that I think is really, it's got a lot of defensive linemen and things out there that I think are going to be really sought after maybe in the first round. Maybe there's a chance that you might see an elite talent at running back kind of fall down there. And so I think that this would be really a dream scenario if this could happen. But I would say that this is a situation that the Washington Commanders would jump on if this player fell all the way down. And so, again, this is a dream scenario, but I would say that if Ashton Genty of Boise State fell down somehow to 29. I think that you take him no matter what, even though we do have some other needs with the wide receiving room and then also to the offensive lineman, I think are something that we can really upgrade as well. But I think you go out and get Genty. I think that he's a player that he's a home run player. I loved, his tape. Obviously, we've seen what he can do in the open field. I think he runs well behind his pad levels and things like that. And he just seems like the type of player that I think would certainly change, this running back room. And it's something that it's like when you invest into a running back in the draft, you're looking at for some years to come, which I think is something that maybe, this ownership does. I think this is something that Adam Peters is really probably looking to do. He's more looking for the long term versus the short term, which is why I think that maybe you see the Washington Commanders go out and address the running back room via the draft. And if you don't get this dream scenario to happen, make no mistake about it, I would love to get this guy here. They have him compared to a LaDainian Tomlinson, who used to play for the San Diego Chargers. We know how good he was, and I do agree right in hand. I think that he's definitely one of those type of players. But I think the Washington Commanders can even hit on a couple of other players behind him. In fact, another player that maybe comes to mind that the Washington Commanders could maybe get here is Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina. I think that, he looks very good here on tape. He reminds me a lot of like Eddie George when I'm thinking back in the day, of a player that he runs a little tall, but he doesn't necessarily have the breakaway speed, but I think he runs with some good power. And so that is something that I think kind of goes hand in hand with our team, because remember, as we dominated really the time of possession, then we won those football games. And in order to really dominate the time of possession, you need to be able to run the football well. You need to be able to stay ahead of the sticks, which is why the running game is very important, and which is why you need to really lean on that in playoff football. As much as, offenses are set to go down the field, you need to be able to have some power running. And so, with Omarion Hampton, look, he's done very well as far as having all-purpose yards. I think he had over 2,000 all-purpose yards and 17 touchdowns. And so he's a player that maybe the Washington Commanders could get. I think another player that really jumps out here after him would be maybe Caleb Johnson of Iowa. I think that he's a player maybe the Washington Commanders go out and get at 6 feet, 225 pounds. And what I like about him is just his ability to really be a home run hitter once he gets out of the backfield. He reminds me a lot of a Priest Holmes type of player. Doesn't necessarily run with the same type of power as an Edgerrin James, but he does remind me a little bit of that. And so I'm just going back in the day and reminding me of some of these players that played back then that were very great. And so, these are two players that maybe the Washington Commanders maybe look for in the draft. I think that that is certainly a great pivot. And I think that when you look at this, and this is probably something that's not talked about as much because we know that the Washington Commanders need to get better as far as what they need to do in the receiving room. But the Washington Commanders have not had a legit 1,000-yard rusher, I think, since Antonio Gibson did it, where he rushed over 1,000 yards. And so, look, that was in 2021. And so the Washington Commanders need to get back to that type of football. I feel like that type of identity is what they need. And when you talk about upgrading the offensive lineman, then I'm starting to think about the Russ Grimms, the Joe Jacoby, Joe Bugle coaching them up. Like, I think that has been really the foundation of this franchise and really has led to some success in running the football. And so that's why you need to really upgrade that. And so one of the things that was talked about as far as maybe the Washington Commanders doing so is maybe they take a chance with Josh Simmons. And so this is on NFL.com, the first mock trade, saying that maybe Josh Simmons out of Ohio State is a player that maybe the Commanders take. He's a very good offensive lineman. And I think he's terrific as far as some of the things that they talk about. They have him linked to a player like a DJ Humphries, which he's going to be playing for the Chiefs in the Super Bowl this week. And they're saying, look, he's very smooth when he comes out of his stance and into space. He's got some great quickness as far as cutting off positions and things like that. Knows how to gather rushers from the shoulder, firm outside hands. These are all great things to note. I think really one of the main key takeaways here, as far as a weakness is concerned, is not the fact that they're saying that he needs to get maybe a little bit more upper body strength. I think that that's probably natural for every player moving to the next level. But I think what they're saying is he's coming off a season-ending knee surgery that he sustained in October. And so I think that that's probably going to be the biggest thing. One of the notes that they say here on NFL.com is he's really athletic, really talented. Knee injury robbed him of valuable playing time, but he's gotten better each year on tape. That's an AFC personnel director here. And so you can catch that on NFL.com. And so, anyway, the upside is there. I think that Adam Peters has shown that he knows what he's doing as far as addressing the offensive line. And I think that he now is going to have to seriously take a look at this. This is something that really is not talked about in a running back room, so I could see that. And then as far as the wide receiving room, we've said this a little bit. I still think that maybe you do see one of these veterans come over. We talked about it here yesterday with Keenan Allen, maybe Chris Godwin. T. Higgins is a player that I think has been floated out there as well. I could see something like that. Could it be a Jamar Chase situation with his situation and what's going on with the Cincinnati Bengals? Now, I don't know. I know he wants to be paid, and that's something that I'm not sure that this front office is necessarily looking to do as far as giving up some draft capital to do so. But they're going to have to make a decision. I know the salary cap is going to be there for them to make a good signing, but you're going to have to do something because Zacchaeus, De'Ami Brown, Jamison Crowder, like these guys are all free agents. And we know that Terry McLaurin, is a legit number one, but you got to find a number two. I think that these three things unlock the offense. You address the wide receiving room, you address your linemen, and then you address your running back. And suddenly I think that these Washington Commanders are ready to take another step. And so let me know in the comments what you think about this most recent information. Do you feel like, yes, these are the three areas that are most important to this team as far as upgrading in the offseason? Love to know what you're thinking as far as what the Washington Commanders can do in the draft. I'll see you on the next video where we'll be talking a little bit more about some free agent moves and possibly some more things that the Washington Commanders can do in this upcoming NFL draft. As I always like to say, go Commanders, and I will see you in the next one. All right, peace.